Hi everybody, and a very warm welcome back to my wildlife art channel. Now today I got something particularly special. I've got a lovely black maned lion all the way from Etosha, and I'm going to do it in watercolor. So let's roll the intro and let's see how we get on with it. Hi everybody, and a very warm welcome back to the channel. Now, as I said just now, I am going to be doing a watercolor for you today, and it's going to be of a beautiful black maned lion that I photographed on one of my trips to Etosha in Namibia a few years ago. Now, this was taken at a waterhole called New Brownie, and it's just outside of the camp of Okakwio. And I love this lion, and I took so many pictures of it, and I felt that it would make a fantastic watercolor to share with you guys in this video. So without further ado, let's crack on. Let's get and see how it turns out. Okay everybody, let's get this lovely picture of a black maned lion underway. Now the reference is up here in the top right hand side of your screen, and if you want to paint along with this, whether you're one of my Patreon members or indeed if you are on my YouTube channel and watching it here and the shorter version, then don't forget that the line art and the reference photo are free to download over on my Patreon or indeed on my Podia platform as well. There are two places that you can visit, and you can download the reference and the line art for free. You do not need to be one of my Patreon members in order to do that. Now before we go on with the painting itself, let's just quickly look at some of the materials we're going to be using. And the first thing, of course, has been staring you in the face is the paper, the Bao Hong paper from China. Okay, so now for the paints that I have. I will leave a full list in the details underneath this and other watercolor videos. Now the brushes that I'm using on this demo, as I do in all my watercolor demos, are my Rosemary and Company. Now with the exception of this one, which is a series 301, which is just a very small #1 round for very small bits of detail F1. I rarely use it, it's there if I need it. But these are the core to what I use, and that's a big number 14 round. I have a number 10 round, a number 5 round, and they're all synthetic brushes from the Red Dot series. Now if you go onto Rosemary and Company's website, they do offer a service all the way around the world. These brushes are handmade by Rosemary and her team, and they have gained the respect of major artists all over the globe. So I can't recommend them enough. I've been painting with her brushes for probably close on 25 years, 25 years. I actually don't know without looking it up. But I've always enjoyed working with Rosemary. The only brush that I haven't got here is or the one that I haven't mentioned is a number 2 rigger. And again, that is for me quite indispensable, and it holds water well, delivers the paint well, and I had no issues. And these have been used for the last 3 or so years in almost every week, twice a week, 3 times a week. They're constantly in use, and they don't look as though they're holding their shape, but honestly they do point up very, very well. So I can't recommend them enough. And if you do decide to go onto Rosemary's website and buy any of her brushes, whether it's an oil, acrylic brushes, watercolor brushes, it doesn't matter. Whichever brush you do, when you get to the checkout, if you just put my name in Paul Apps in unbroken capitals on the affiliate link at checkout, then that will help me out. You pay no more, but I get a little thank you from Rosemary, which I can then turn into a few brushes of my own choice somewhere down the road. Enough of me gassing on, let's get on with the tutorial. Now I have my lion already sketched out and done. I also have a test piece of paper that I can use to evaluate colors before I apply them. But the first and biggest thing that I need to do here is just talk about how we're going to go about this one, because the idea is that on here what I would like to do would be to have a series of washes, and I want them warm and cool, and I want them to come across the animal too. I want to leave some light sections by lifting out some of the paint and some bluer colors here. Essentially, a lot of this is a very warm painting because we have a brown or mixed brown colors within our lion, and even the mane, albeit called a black mane lion, it's actually quite a dark brown, especially down through here. But then the rest of the background is almost the same sort of series of warm colors. If you look carefully, you can pick out a little bit of violet in some of them, but the only real cooler colors are really around the chin here and maybe a little bit through the back here, and I'm going to add those as I go. So this painting is going to be a series of multiple layers where I lay in color in different times, whether it's fully dry or partly dry. So the first things first, then let's get this underway because I've probably been talking way too long, and I'm going to put several colors with different mixes. Now the trick with doing such a big area, of course, is making sure that you have sufficient color, and my colors are pretty much consistent in terms of their sort of water to pigment ratio. We've got something of a bit of a grungy mid-tone because my violet is a violet, and because there's a lot of yellow in there, they're not quite on the complementary opposites, but they are getting that way, and because of that they mix together will make you a pretty grungy mid-tone color. Okay, so I haven't mixed up all my colors in advance. I'm going to start with the top and I'm going to work a wash down. Now my picture is at about a 30-degree angle, just slightly less maybe, but all of my paintings predominantly are always about complementary color. Not direct complementaries, but warms and cools that could complement each other or become greys accordingly. Now I've left an awful lot of area in the foreground as white paper. There's no real need to cover the whole thing, but you can see I am dropping colors in, warm colors, cool colors. Having let that dried, I'm now coming in with the second layer. This whole painting will be about successive layers, one upon the other, and as I develop the colors and the strengths of colors and all the bits of detail both in the cat and in the foreground. So that's really what I'm about with this picture. Now these different warm and cool second layer colors in the background are really just giving rise to a bit of information beyond the line. Now the whole of the Atosha pan is sort of fairly flat, but it's got little punctuations with ridges of grasses and dead this and dried that, and that's all this layer really is trying to suggest. Okay, with that pretty much all done, I'm going to start turning my attentions to the lion, and we are starting to look at the second layer. The first layer, of course, just suggested the warms and cool, the warm on the mane and the cool in the saddle or the shadow part of the body. But now I'm putting in more cools, and predominantly over the whole of this painting the coolest colors are around the muzzle and on the back of the animal, and in a few rocks that I'll paint later in the foreground. For the rest of it, it's a whole raft of different warm colors and different degrees of warmth, so you need to punctuate that nicely with a certain amount of cooler colors, and that's what I'm trying to instill here. This second layer is much deeper, much stronger. There is less water and there is more pigment going around, and that's the way I develop the whole of the picture. You can see I've gone in with a very strong contrasty shadows. They will also be deepened later on. Remember that the pigment you put onto your watercolor right now will dry lighter than that you put on, so you will, if you don't get it right straight away, you're going to have to go back in with subsequent layers to deepen that color until you reach the desired depth of contrast in your painting overall. I'm going to come in with a little bit more cool shade up into the top part of this leg and a few sort of spots. Now you don't get actual spots on a lion, but you do. They're so faint when, as they grow older, the spots are still there, but they're really faint. You see them more on cubs, but even so, they do grow out as the cat gets a little older, and you see less and less of them. But lions do have spots, but they're very, very faint ones. Alright, I'm just going to put in a little colour into that part of the heel, and just coming down with a few sort of warmer statements that I'm going to let dry before I come back in. I think they need to be a little bit more orangey than that. Well, not orangey, but a little bit more of sienna going on. We're not using too many colours in our painting, to be fair, and we are allowing the yin-yang of warm and cool to say everything we need it to do. I come in here and drop in that little bit of colour down through here. Okay, so you can already see that I'm coming into the painting of the cat with my third layer. Now, a lot of people do get quite worried about successive layers in the same area. But if you take one or two things into consideration as you move forward, i.e. you don't go into it too fast, and you make sure that there's a little less water with the colors that you're putting in before you get started. And of course that the layer underneath is almost dry. Doesn't have to be totally dry, almost dry. Then you can carry on adding layers. But what you don't want to do is to become so heavy that it looks or becomes like an oil painting or an acrylic painting. You still need to allow that lovely white paper underneath to radiate through your colors. That's why so many people use an awful lot of transparent colors when they're painting in watercolor, and not so many opaque colors. And I think that's something to be mindful of when you're painting forward. So try and bring the colors up steadily. Try and bring them to a point where you're not making very heavy, very dark statements. I'm working on the face now and adding some of those darker marks, some of the darks between the little bits of fur on the face, and adding the shadow areas. In other words, I'm working negatively on the cat as I move forward. Lots of cools coming in, but of course many darks will be replacing those later on as I develop the mane on this dark maned lion, and just taking out a little bit of color with a cloth or with a piece of towel in my hand, always at the ready. It's such a great device to get you out of trouble if you put too much pigment in. You can see I'm just changing the direction of the brush to suggest that there are lots of lovely little subtle lines and colors moving in through and around the mane. Put a little bit of dark into the base here, not too much. Just want to come off here with a few suggested mid-tone darks that will allow me to suggest the darker parts and still allow a little bit of light pop through them. Maybe a little bit more warmth. So slightly warmer, bring that in. Not going to see too much of this, so don't worry too much about that. I'll bring in a few subtle colors, and then we will come over that with some darker ones. There is a really annoying light one through there on the leg. I'm forgetting about it, I'm afraid. I'm not going to bother with that. like that, and just suggesting that there's a little bit of shape there. Alright, gonna leave that alone. Now the big part. I'm gonna come in with some indigo, predominantly indigo, and quite thick pigment. Not too much, but enough that it will sit on the brush. You don't want too much coming off the end of the brush. You want almost a pencil line. And this is the bit that I've sort of been waiting to do. And this will bring our cat alive. Is that dark enough? No, it is not. So let's just come back in with a bit more indigo and come out and draw this eye out. Okay, there are many people out there that will tell you that when they do a painting of either a human figure, a portrait, or an animal, that they start with the eyes. There is the old saying that the eyes are the souls of the picture, and many other quotations very similarly. And that's true. One does need to have to think about the detail, and people focus on the eyes of something before they focus on any other aspect of the painting generally. So the eyes are really obviously the focal point. Now, I didn't want to do that in this painting. I wanted to get pretty much set up with everything else, pretty much all the colors in place and some of the detail put in before I got to the eyes. There was a lot of subtle colors underneath the darks, and because I'm working in watercolor, I wanted to get those in place, and it's a lot easier to do that than try and come back and do the darks or the lights after I'd done the dark areas of the eyes. So I'm quite happy to sort of not follow tradition in this case and do the eyes as and when I felt they were ready to be done, which is right now. Okay, just a few soft ones in through that side, like that. Alright, and that pretty much is that area sorted out. What I will do is I will come in with a thinner brush again, a bit more indigo to our warm colour, and I just want to put in the nose. Now the nose is sort of, that is the dark part through there. It comes up to a point and then back down again, and we've got the nostrils to bring in. I'm just going to bring that down all the way down through here. Missed a bit there, didn't want that in, and I certainly didn't want to do that. A little bit of quick action to lift that back out fast, and maybe just tap, not panic like I just did. Just bring that dark back in carefully this time. There you go. Okay, now as that comes down now into the mouth area like that, and then I'm just going to bring that so far there like that, and then this way under here. Now I'm going to drop this out. Now I'll show you what I mean. I'm just going to tap this 1, 2, 3 and just leave little areas, suggesting that what's happening is there are little hairs, very minute hairs. You can't, well, they're whiskers, but you can't see them at this distance, not properly. I'm just suggesting they're there. Okay, now I quite like this, but I want to soften this. I think it's just a little bit too aggressive. So I'm teasing these pigments out ever so slightly. I'm just checking the whole thing. I think that drawing is out a little bit here, so I'm just going to bring out that leg. I think it's got a little bit emaciated there. Very powerful animal, so I don't want to take a bit of his muscle away and do him any injustice by doing that. And I'm going to come down through here now with a bit more dark, but I'm going to make it a little browner. Remember, I had that quite dark browns in here. I'll make that a little deeper, and then put a little bit more sienna and burnt and raw sienna together. And just going to bring that into play as we come down to what is the foot here, going into shadow behind that stone, which I'm just going to put that bit of stone in. Okay, now then, how much more do I really want to do? Put a little mark in there. There's something out there. And I'm going to put a few darker marks in, because this is the darkest element on our painting. And I want to bring in a few darker taps in between some of the ground, so that there is a little bit of an understanding that there is sharp contrast not only in the cat, but also on the ground around him. Just the odd little bit of foreground, a little bit of matter that's sort of there. I might change to the rigger and tap some of this into place. It will give me some slightly shorter, smaller marks, which I can just tap and leave and separate out like that. I can suggest the edge of a stone in that fashion by coming up to it and sort of going around the top of it or around the side of it or whatever, and creating the odd little bits of reference that suggest extra. Okay everybody, well, we really are on the final parts of this painting, and I'm using the rigger with some dark accents to break up some of the pale ground in the foreground. Suggestions, nothing more, nothing actual, just little flicks and tips with the brush here and there, just to suggest that there are more bits of debris on the ground in and around the line itself. I'm also adding some warmth into certain places where it may be a little too cool. Having added some of those lovely warm accents to the cool ground, I'm also going to mix up a little bit of area around between the legs. I think I'd missed that out a little bit. I'm just trying to bring them a little bit more closer together with a few more suggested areas out there on the field behind the line itself. And now I'm going to mix up a pretty cool dark, a little bit of blue on the stone, but quite a nice dark color to suggest our cat is walking up the ground and not floating in the air, and it does have a bit of presence. With all that done, I think it's now time to sign the painting, and we'll start wrapping this one up. Okay, so just to complete a little bit extra, I've just seen something else in the grand scheme of things. I just want to put in a bit of red, a little bit of blue, a little bit of orange, a bit of the indigo again. I just want to come in here, and I think it's probably a little bit more red too. Just take a lot of the paint off out of the thing. I just want to come in here and suggest a few straggling little hairs that I could have put in, hadn't put in. Right, so just tap them. They don't need to be too strong, too much in evidence. Okay everybody, one finished painting of a male lion from Etosha in Namibia, a black maned lion done in watercolour. Now, I've got to say right from the get-go, I really have enjoyed this one. It's been a long painting, I know, but I have personally learned something from doing it, and for me that is a big win-win. This painting will stand the test of time because of what I've learned from it and what I've done to create it. And I do hope you guys will pop on over to my Patreon or my Podia site and download the reference and the line art and have a go at this one yourself. It really is a lovely subject and it's a lovely study. So yeah, get involved with it. If you come over via my Patreon, you do not need to be a patron to download it, but as always, take a look at it, and if you want to get involved in the Patreon site generally, then you'd be most welcome. I'd love to have you aboard. And if you're over on my Podia site downloading the reference, again, all you got to do is leave and register your email, become a site member as such, and you get involved with all the free stuff on there. And again, if you want to buy into a course, a Sky course, and I think there's an ink and wash course there, you can buy into those. You don't have to spend any money, but it's there if you want to make the reference useful to you. Anyway, I am going to stop now. I've been gassing on all these hours, if you're on my Patreon that is, and I'm going to get ready for the next painting. I have no idea what it's going to be yet, but I look forward to your company very, very soon with the next one. Take care of yourself, enjoy your painting, have fun with this one. Catch you all very, very soon. Bye bye for now. Bye bye.